So thank you all for sticking with us through today, engaging in the conversations and dialogue. We wanted to just have a moment together at the end of the day to sort of reflect on some of the themes that have been coming out from our discussions. Thank you also to all those who've joined us online, including members of our program committee there too. This is fairly unplanned, but we just wanted to have a moment to draw out some of the themes of the discussions we've been having, particularly to think about ways forward, about action in light of the AI Action Summit. We've put this together as a side event, partly seeing that participatory strand of thinking is not centered at the heart of the main event, and we want to kind of gather and think about that, but also think about how can we make sure the participatory turn is embedded more thoroughly in future. So with no real structure to it, I'm going to just come to each of our chairs of workshops, and if there are other people who chair workshops who do want to join us, you are welcome. Just to ask you for 2 or 3 reflections of themes arising from your conversations, particularly those that point ways forward for us all to think about. Meg, would you be up for going first?
Hi, everyone. This is an open space and conversation. If you have a burning takeaway that you want to amplify, there'll be a moment at the end to share. But what I gathered today is that we have come from all over the world and that there is an increasing depth and breadth of people already engaged in participatory AI. We have come with methods, case studies, partnerships, concrete frameworks that we're putting into practice. And it's palpable to me that there is a growing acceptance that this is part of the path forward for AI to be done responsibly, to be done in a way that will work for people in the variegated communities that we come from. But there are many questions that we're only beginning to have time to ask in this space about that Tim teed up at the beginning about infrastructure. What is the social infrastructure that will support participation in AI to happen? How can it be folded into our development and governance practices durably in a way where people are organized to be consulted in a granular and robust way without them being overwhelmed and burned out? How do we avoid it taking the same path as GDPR and the cookie, where something really beautiful, which is the idea of our data rights, our data not to be used in ways that we do not consent to, becoming so atomized that it is operationalized at the level of a single individual user choice that you're inundated with all day at every website that you go to? How can participation become something that is collectively legitimate and able to be translated across appropriate, commensurate communities? Computing can make that happen, but we aren't there yet. And so I encourage us all to think about what is the version of the world that we're working toward, and how can all of the energy that we share start to work more in concert with one another toward a common understanding of the social infrastructure that we're building.
Wow, such a positive take. Unfortunately, I have to say I had a much more negative take, which is at the level of government development, design, deployment, and governance of AI. Participatory models are not working, and they're really not participatory. And to be controversial, maybe we're barking up the wrong tree. Not to say that participatory models aren't good. They are important, good, and I wish that we could show that they actually achieve what we want. But I also feel like coming from a country that is captured by some big tech. I think there's a lot of big tech that are very threatened by what's happening. So I don't want to generalize too much, but we need more effective models. And I hope you will all boycott American companies soon.
Thank you, Susan. So reflections coming out of the governance track. In the case of our workshop, the conversation really centered on accountability practices. Specifically, we looked at audits, red teaming, impact assessments, and other evaluation mechanisms and recognized them as part of practices that are situated within broader systems of governance. We also recognize that these are all practices that we've actually drawn from other fields, and in the process of reframing and contextualizing them for AI, one thing that has happened and we're seeing is how participatory methods are being baked in and built into these practices. We recognize that engaging the publics must go beyond capturing instrumental feedback into rather focusing on deliberate feedback. We also raised the importance of the roles of auditors doing and how doing this kind of work and assessments on the ground and with communities is a way of really building literacy and activism and resistance within communities. And we finally ended with just a reflection that we need to scale this field if we really want to make any impact, and our role and all of us here together and how we can act as conveners in doing this work. Oh, that works.
Okay. Of course, I'm going to say resist, disrupt, counter, and contest. Listen to the global South. I think the global North may have run out of good ideas. Second, not all AI is big and scary. I've said this before, but most AI used in government is small. It's classification systems. You can contest that. AI comes from remote sensing in part. That's where we saw a lot of machine learning. We can contest that. It's not all LLMs and diffusion models. Third, that I think I'm hoping that this event gave us a chance to be vulnerable, to experience slowness, and to appreciate risk aversion. Canada is a very risk-averse country, and sometimes that's a good idea. And lastly, I would ask people not to let AI rob you of your emotions and your interpersonal contacts.
Thank you. I don't know how to follow that because our session was actually having, which was about AI as a tool for participation. And so there's an assumption that actually AI is probably useful to scale participation without actually discovering what we mean by scaling. And you just said we probably need to scale this field if we want to make any impact. But actually, in our conversation, we unpacked what we meant by scaling up, scaling out, scaling deep, scaling in, scaling out, and they all have different meanings. And in terms of the use of AI in deliberative processes, for instance, people were saying, do we want to use AI to aggregate these data, make sense of it? What are the limits of that? How can we trust it? In terms of the other aspects as well of scaling up, what does that mean? Do we need to have processes at local all the way to the global? So looking at the scales in terms of where decision-making power lies and what does that mean for the processes you design. So in our group, I would say we came up with lots of really interesting research agenda for the next symposium you'll organize next year.
So my takeaway actions definitely don't come up with the idea of a small symposium and then let it get out of hand. So my takeaway is a giveaway, which is the symposium. If any of you want to take and run with elements of this convening, happy to support. But please, we can share what we've learned, but really that piece of we need the convening spaces, but that's a shared responsibility for us all to work together on. I think we had a very small open space discussion in that last slot, but did come up with 5 or 6 takeaways. One was to think about our funding. Many of us are here because we believe in democracy and democratic engagement rather than specifically interested in AI alone. And it's the fact that that is the hook that attracts us to work in that space at the moment. But should we be seeking to build the funding and the resourcing for democratic practice rather than trying to carve out a small part of democracy within AI? Funding and resourcing, the funding affects what we do, and we need to be strategic and open-eyed about that. Similarly, the narratives matter. Like when we do work to build citizen power within an AI framework, which narratives do we reinforce? Which narratives do we challenge about that? We talked about participant perspectives and whose voices have we been directly hearing from. And I know we gave all our presenters like 10 minutes to give you all their work, so that many of them, I think, would have direct voices of publics to bring in, but it's always useful to question which publics are we hearing in our day-to-day conversations, which publics are heard over the next few days of the summit. Are we seeing enough of those direct voices being there, and what can we do to using the privilege we each have in these spaces to carry with us the voices of publics? For me, that People's Panel on AI we ran last year is really the set of voices that motivated some of this work. I'm challenged we should have given more space directly to those. I think we talked about that continuity of convening and mobilizing the community of researchers and practitioners. We had a very practical thought around the need for a place to pool the results of all the studies on participatory practice. There is a consultation out now for what should the International Scientific Panel on AI look like under the UN Global Digital Compact. I believe that consultation's out for a couple of weeks still. Should we be asking that scientific panel considers public voice and the social science research as valuable as the things that are in the current scientific reports that maybe don't center public voice as fully? And then we talked also about that need when we engage with publics to go beyond one-off activities to support publics to be engaged over the long term, to recognize one-off engagement gets us so far, but we need to be building momentum, whether that's people on a pathway to ongoing participation in the development of AI, in the governance, or in the resistance to it. Making sure we have those pathways for publics is really key. So that was the small group we had. And we are, I think, opening up to your takeaways and thoughts. Meg has the mic, so we have 10 minutes for your takeaways and thoughts, which Meg and Pierre will hand the mic around for.
Hello, it's Anastasia Cavada from the University of Westminster. Many thanks for this, for organizing this. I learned a lot. I have a question around participation washing, which has come out in my mind a lot today. So I heard in the previous panel talking about the co-optation of these processes or their dysfunctionalities, but I'd like to go a step further and start thinking about when the balance of power is so much against the lay citizens and so much in the hands of big tech, and now also sort of like very strong states, you know, and that kind of collaboration that is happening, then how can we ensure that with these participatory processes, it's not only a more democratizing process where there is political power, but they are not being used to actually make better and improve upon proprietary models. So for instance, yes, we include more people and more perspectives and make them more culturally specific and tailored to specific localities, but then in the end, who actually profits from this. So I think we also need to talk about economic power. We need to have more discussion, not only about boycotts, but also the idea of the commons, not as something that OpenAI can come and extract data from, but as a proper commons, right? Because the problem here is that the onset and the development of AI comes with all of this promise of economic development. So once that bubble bursts, there's going to be a huge issue for democracy per se, because we're perpetuating inequality while promising something else. So that's one point. And the other point that I didn't hear much about in all of these sort of like processes of participatory design, but also consultations that have been happening, was whether we are starting from the question of whether we actually need the tool or not, right? So we didn't really talk so much about environmental impact. I mean, I didn't hear much about that. So I'm guessing if you're briefing people about how much this is costing, how much energy it's going to consume, and how you're appropriating resources from other stuff to actually, develop all of this, then I think we're going to have a very different discussion in our hands. Yes, so these are my takeaways in terms of sort of like moving this forward by considering power and making it the center of our understanding of participation.
Additional themes. Any other folk with takeaways or kind of actions to inspire us with or challenge us on or close our convening?
Tim, while you were on the mic, I wanted to pick up what you're saying and just say how essential that what you're sharing is, and two things: that we're in a really dangerous moment where the conversation that just a few years ago had been about what Renee is saying, which is little AI, which is tractable, which is locally deployed, is now becoming swept up in this frenzy of generative AI, specifically foundation models that mostly belong to huge companies like OpenAI, and a gold rush toward all of these high impact sectors like health and finance, trying to route their services through OpenAI because of this myth that the best performance is only achievable at that huge scale. So as participatory researchers, I think it's important for us to really question this narrative that the best performance is only available through these powerful foundation models, and to ask the kinds of questions that you're already asking, which is, whose problems is this solving? Is it true that this way of measuring performance is the best? What about a more holistic, grounded evaluation? And isn't it an intrinsic good for people to have self-determination over their own systems, even if those systems are slightly slower along whatever index? So thanks for your question. And I think that, with something like DeepSeek or open LLMs, that we can start to move toward a reality where we no longer have to deal with participation as solely intervening on these behemoths, but actually we can incubate a bunch of smaller technologies fit for purpose where people can decide whether they move forward or not.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lorelei Kelly. I am at Georgetown. I lead a program in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's to rebuild basically the back end of Congress. Sorry about Congress right now. I know there's like an arson fire going on right now in the United States, including with data. But one of the big problems, as you can probably see, is the opposition party doesn't have an alternative governing strategy. And I think that what we've been talking about here provides an adjacent system, basically, for governing, including with data, and that this is what the Democrats should be doing. And I feel like there's probably a lot of interest in figuring out how to rebuild legitimacy and participation in representative democracy. So I'd really be very grateful for any examples of how to scale something like this kind of participation through existing infrastructure. Like in the US, we're not going to do what France did with a system, a vision of the future on climate change, but it would have to be through local news or nonprofits or somehow. Anyway, so we're having a meeting on Monday at 3 at MAKE. If anyone's interested in trying to figure out how do we specifically help the United States out of its terrible meltdown. But I'm really interested, and I do work directly in Congress, and so can take it into people who have power. Thank you.
A really practical invitation and question. I think we've got time for one last comment or thought. Would anyone? Did you want to? Yes. We'll sum up after.
Hi, my name is Helen McElhinney. I'm the Executive Director of the CDAC network, which stands for Communicating with Disaster Affected Communities in Crisis and Complex Settings. Now, I wanted to start by saying again, a huge thank you for putting this together. It's been an incredible and huge learning moment for me. And I've met lots of interesting people that I want to keep in touch with. I just also wanted to plug some of the work that we are trying to do in partnership with the touring and others. And we'll be having a roundtable looking at this in more detail. And we really need your brains and insights for very practical policy making and decision making right now. We'll try to link it to AI UK in March, and it'll be sponsored, probably hosted either at Touring or FCDO. So please, if you're in the academic space, we need you in this activism stroke policy decision-making space right now. Please do get in touch and work with us on this for the humanitarian community.
Thank you. And I will use that then to segue to our closing piece, which is to share with you on screen a couple of ways of sort of keeping in touch. There are 2 QR codes about to be on screen. The very short-term one is there's a Signal group where people have been self-organizing, going for drinks after the symposium. So if you want to keep in touch with the people in this room right now and have some of those conversations over drinks, you can do that. I'll show you also roughly where people are heading on the next slide if you don't have time to pull up that. It is self-organized. We do not have an official reception. We are not one of the many corporate-funded reception events. We've put this on a shoestring, loss-making kind of budget for you. So self-organized drinks, do head and keep the conversations going. Connected by Data, run a Discord server where we have ongoing conversation and try to bring people together for discussion, sharing, work on participatory practice. You're very welcome to join us there. And maybe I'll leave a last invitation, which is we'll do a wrap-up email once we've got recordings online out to everyone. On the website, you'll find slides from people who've presented, but if others have invitations like the one we just heard for follow-up activities, then please, any of the Eventbrite emails you got, hit reply. That'll come to my inbox. I will try and compile at least a list of those links to follow-up activities that we can share in a week or two's time, so that you've got that chance to, again, keep connected beyond this space. I think beyond that, there is not much for me to say. That's the bar people are suggesting starting at. It probably won't fit everyone if you all go, so there's other bars nearby. You know, it's Paris.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you all. 3 quick more things. First thing, the cafeteria is supposedly already closed, and I just got my I just got schooled a little bit by the people saying, "Oh, there's plenty of stuff down there. If you left your stuff in the cafeteria, or for instance your posters, please hurry to pick it up. It will close at 6, and I'll be downstairs cleaning up. So if anyone wants to give a hand, you're welcome." Which leads me to my second point. Thank you very much to all of the people who volunteered to help us out throughout the day. Marie, sorry, just right there. A couple of you volunteered as Zoom stewards, as just helping people going around. So thanks to all of the people that contributed to making this event a success. We can. And the last thing, as a person who has not really tuned in, I'm not in a good position to comment on the content. What I can tell you is that I've seen many of you meeting new people, interacting, having beautiful conversations, looking very, very happy. So let's keep in mind, just looping back with that comparison with the French Revolution, that the third estate were not made of people just who wanted to resist and be friction. They wanted that and they needed to be that. But they were also proud of what they were doing. And participatory approaches to AI governance and development is not just about resistance. It's also about doing things right, about achieving AIs that are taking us towards desirable futures. We need to be very, very proud of this. You seem to have, a beautiful, you seem very happy to be here and to be part of this community. So let's keep that culture going. It's important. It's perhaps the first commons that we already share, this culture of making a difference.